This lecture is focusing on different strategies, considerations, and technology that you can use as you're constructing a visual argument. So in terms of this project to construct your own visual argument, there are a ton of different choices that you need to make in terms of how you want to really work on appealing to your viewers. Because, of course, depending on the choices that you make, your viewers can view that argument differently. They would have to think about it a little bit differently. And then, of course, it may be more or less effective depending on those choices. So, the overall choices that you do need to make are the layout of your argument. So whether your argument is vertical or horizontal, which we will be talking about. Another choice is the image or images you want to use to appeal to your audience. Depending on the colors of the images, the emotions specifically those images evoke, they can have very different reactions in terms of how viewers are responding. Then you want to consider how much text you want to use as well as the wording of the text. And that's really important when we get to the framing, so how the images and the text are positioned in relationship to one another, especially if we think about depending on that framing, viewers would focus on different information first and then look at the other information later. So we really want to frame it in a way that benefits that argument and follows that logical progression. And last, in terms of important choices that you do need to make, is really centered on the size, the font, and the color of the text that you use, because this can really affect clarity as well as how the font, the color, the size really captures your audience's attention. So to begin with, we have format and framing. So format and framing really is bringing together how you're organizing the image and the text together. So as we can see here, we do have a number of horizontal design options. So this means that the specific visual argument is wider than it is tall. So if we look at the image specifically on the left, we have the teal box. So what you can notice here is that black circle is representative of where the main part of the image would be. So it's on the left, and of course, if we think about how most readers read, especially here in the United States, readers read from left to right. So when you organize your visual argument in this way, that means that you want them to focus on the image first, and then you want them to consider the text that you use. How much space you really have for that text on the right-hand side is really up to you, as well as how much text really benefits your argument. That's really going to be a choice that you're going to be making. The center example, which is in that fuchsia, we can see that we have text on the left, the circle representing specifically the image in the center, and then we have options for more text on the right. So this is a progression. It's still following reading it from left to right, but in this case, you want them to consider that text you have on the left-hand side before you want them to pay attention to that image and then the text on the right. So this is a strategy can be really helpful, especially if on the left-hand side you are including a rhetorical question or some type of hook that you really want your audience to think about, the image that would have an emotional response in the center, and then maybe ending with factual information or information where your audience can get other resources so that you're really ending on what they can do or really ending with the logic of that argument. And on our final example, the one on the right in the green, we have the text presented on the left-hand side of the screen, and we have the right side having that black dot representing the image. So in reverse of that first example we talked about, in this case, you really want your audience to focus on the text first. You really want to break down what you want them to believe and the reasons, and then you want to end on that emotional appeal with the image itself. So depending on the arguments, if you do want horizontal, then these are your three main options. Then, of course, we have vertical design options. So this means that in terms of the argument, it is taller than it is wide. So this is very different because, of course, how we look at that image, typically we tend to look from top to bottom. So the choices we make are going to be dictated based on that. So in the first option, we have the teal background. We have that black dot representing the image at the top. So that's what you really want your audience to pay attention to first. And then we have the text on the bottom, which would be adding additional information, basically our factual information about whatever issue we're arguing for. So this one's a really good one if you just want to catch their attention at first before you get into more information, essentially. The center example has the text on the top. So very similar to a horizontal version, that text on the top would be catching that attention. So either a question or quote or statement that's really going to draw that audience in. So as they look down, as they look at that image and they look at the text that's under that image, they're already guiding in towards of what argument you're making and how you want them to view and assess that image and that information. Our final example, the one on the right with the green, we have the text on the top and the image on the bottom, which similar to our horizontal design options means that you really want them to process and think about that information you're presenting in that text and then end on that image, end on whatever emotional appeal you're making using that image. Regardless of the specific format and framing you choose to use, the coloring should be very purposeful. So in terms of the colors of the font, you want to have font that catches the attention, but also font that really stands out from whatever image you're choosing. You don't want the font to be hard to read. You don't want the color to. And as we're putting this together, there are a bunch of resources that you can use that are available. So, of course, for the visual argument, if you are artistic and you want to hand make one, that is an option. You just have to upload a picture of your visual argument for that assignment. However, if you would prefer to use technology, there are a number of resources available, many of which are free. For instance, you can get a Google account if you don't already have a Gmail, and that gives you access to Google Slides. And using Google Slides, you can very easily create a horizontal image, really play around with the placement of the picture and font and colors. There are a lot of options there. As a Palomar College student, you have access to PowerPoint, so you can get Microsoft Office Suite for free with your student email. There are other online resources for free. For instance, there's unsplash.com, which is a database of free to use images. That's really good in terms of searching for different types of images that you might want to use. And of course, there's completely licensed, so you don't have to worry about copyright clauses. Then, of course, there's Adobe Spark, which is an online Adobe editing option, especially. So the one thing with Adobe Spark is you do have to create an account, but the account is free. And then you can create digital posters that are horizontal or vertical. So there are a lot of options there, and we're going to take a look at a few.